Hi there. My name is Jorge Lopes Machado Ramos. I know, the thing is, long names are a normal thing for Brazilians. We have adopted the naming patterns of our Portuguese colonizers, so both the surnames of the mother and the father are added to your name. The full name of Brazil's second king, Peter II, was Pedro de Alcântara João, Carlos, Leopoldo Salvador Bibiano, Francisco Xavier de Paula, Leocádio Miguel Gabriel Rafael Gonzaga, de Bragança e Bourbon. You see, because of this colonized mindset, most Brazilian parents still think that the more names you give your child, the more important they will sound. And yes, my daughter has 6 names, thank you. Doctors and school receptionists love us. But hold on, a minute has now passed and you're wondering, what does any of this have to do with the talk? Well, for one, you now know I'm Brazilian. My grandparents came to Brazil from Poland and from Ukraine. My grandmother was a fruit seller and my granddad a watchmaker. I grew up surrounded by the Borel favela in Rio de Janeiro. It's where 20,000 people live in a hill like a horseshoe. So as a child, I would wait here at the bus stop with my mother and my brothers for the shooting between the 2 gangs to stop so we could get home. Sometimes it seemed like it was over and we'd make a run for it, only for it to start again, so we'd have to run back to our safe corner again. But to me as a child, there was nothing unusual about ducking bullets to get home. These tiroteios, or shootouts, were very common. It certainly gives a different meaning to the idea of a school run, right? Violence was the backdrop, and it was routine to hear someone you knew had just died due to a bala perdida or a stray bullet. If you can't tell where this is going at, stay with me. As well as knowing that I'm an immigrant, you also now know I'm from a working class family who were themselves immigrants back in Brazil. And that a fear of violence was a constant for us as children. English is not my first language, and I didn't leave Brazil until I was an adult. So when I arrived here, I literally couldn't understand a word people were saying. I didn't know anyone. So I desperately looked for a strong role model who could teach me how to be proper English, so I could belong. The same way my family must have done when they first landed in Brazil and had to get used to a new normal. And that was my experience in adapting, mirroring, and replicating the dominant ideology around me so that I could fit in. I learned how to drink warm beer, and I'm probably the most punctual Brazilian you will ever meet. And as you can probably tell, the way I speak English was influenced by that desire to be proper. That's why I sound like this. So let us finally return to the topic of this talk. I've used my first few minutes to set the scene and to share with you how an inferiority complex, a long name, background of violence, and a working class immigrant background, and the desire to fit in, have shaped my experience of what normal is. However, I haven't yet touched on my privilege. I'm an able-bodied cis man. I mix race, but I come across as white. And I had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study abroad, and that's why I ended up here. So, it is from this position that I can categorically tell you everything we think about when we hear the word normal is not only wrong, but it is also dangerous. Our associations to normality tend to represent a history that has been told to us, and a history that happens to us. Very rarely we associate normality with a reality we create ourselves. We are told to either replicate it or get used to it. So, back to dodging bullets, the tiroteio. I remember that whenever one of those shootouts would be happening, street hawkers and sellers would turn up very soon afterwards. They knew that if a tiroteio had started, there would be a captive audience, like my mom and me and my brother, who they could sell their snacks to, like a biscoito polvilho or água de coco drink, as we waited. This adaptive spirit is the older cousin of gambiarra. And if you don't know what gambiarra is, well, is a well-known Brazilianism, is the art of the bodge or the makeshift. It is how to make quirky improvisational fixes to our lives. Here are a few examples. Sure, they are funny, yes, but importantly, they work. These are great examples of taking familiar things and hacking their use by combining them unexpectedly. These adaptations were all made using things that people, my fellow Brazilian innovators, already had. But I still haven't told you what I do for a living. I run a theatre and digital arts company called ZU UK with Persis Jade Maravala. I'm lucky enough to work with the most incredible artist I have ever met. I'm also associate professor here at the University of Greenwich. But basically, Jade and I make things that didn't exist before. Things for people to interact with and things for people to play with. We make it for people like us, people who don't fit in, people who feel like they don't belong. We create projects by, with, and for people who have grown accustomed to being left out of circles of privilege and who don't believe art, games, technology is really for them. People who don't believe that they are capable creators. Today, we will change this. I invite you to make history together, here. We will use our collective powers and existing resources to make something special happen. At ZU UK, we call this hacking the familiar. We believe that we should hack the things that are already familiar and accessible, and not based on privilege or exclusivity like expensive tickets and the latest unaffordable technology. This is part of our vision for the post-normal. It is based on the realization we already have everything we need to create things. It's only about knowing where to find it and how to use it. So here's some examples. This is the work we make. Back in 2006, we made Hotel Medea. It was an overnight experience based on the Greek myth of Medea. Hotel Medea represented a transitional moment for us, where audiences who were used to watching theatre from their seats and clapping politely at the end were invited to a 6-hour-long experience that started at midnight and ended at dawn, with a large breakfast table. The reason why it worked is because it was made up of completely familiar rituals, such as attending a wedding party, making a shrine, playing hide and seek. In Binaural Dinner Dates, we created a dating agency that used binaural sound to bring strangers together in cafes, restaurants, and public squares. What can be more familiar than a table and chairs? When you arrive, you're matched with a stranger and then served by a heartbroken waiter who guides you through a series of interactions on how to fall in love. In Pick Me Up and Hold Me Tight, it was a project where we made all the UK's nearly 34,000 payphones ring at the same time. That is every UK payphone ringing at 11 a.m. on the 1st of January. The time is significant. This is the time that marks the UK's annual peak in suicides. So, from staying awake all night, to picking up a ringing phone, to making small talk with a stranger, each of these examples asks us to reconnect with our lesser used skills and to use them together to make something seemingly impossible happen. So why do we do these things and why now? Well, what I see now that I only realized after I'd met Jade was that instead of being ashamed of my start in life, my third world status that others confer to my country, I instead decided to embrace it. Not only as a content for our work, but as the actual model for it. As immigrant artists approaching normality from the margins, we have experienced our fair share of being left out when it comes to what's accepted in our industry. And we know we're not alone. For a very long time, we used to take the dominant culture as the only thing to aspire to, until we realized that the very experiences, the ideas, the skills that made us not fit in were actually what we needed for the post-normal. So now, we believe that in order for us to make sense of our next steps as humankind, we need to first refuse the safe version of normality that we've been programmed to replicate. The same programming and fear that shaped my inferiority complex, my very long name, my desperate desire to belong when I arrived in the UK. That is precisely why it's not enough to go back to the way things were. We can't just embrace a new normal because normal is what got us here in the first place. We can't return to the same hierarchies that are built by the same people and in the same way as the previous normal, but just with a funky new branding. The post-normal is a new way of relating to one another, of dismantling orthodoxies, and challenging people's ideas of what is and what isn't possible. We should not get used to a new normal. We can be the creators of the post-normal. And for that, we will need to allow ourselves to take those risks together. Those risks that we are often too afraid to take because we believe somebody else knows better than us. Look, I am a hands-on person. I've been talking for far too long now. So let's put your money where my mouth is. We've seen that in the post-normal, change will come from the bottom up. But if the very first step is often through an invitation. So I'm going to invite you to make something with me. Following the same principles we've just seen in my other shows, I'm going to invite you to make a show with me. You absolutely don't have to, but it won't be just any old show. It will be an aerobatic display extravaganza. The show will be breathtaking. The show will be talked about for years to come. The best bit? It'll be made by us here together. Second best bit? We're gonna do it Gambiarra style. Okay, all right. If you're up for it, please reach under your chair. You should find a sheet of paper. In co-creating a post-normal future, we have to be aware that there are existing pockets of knowledge everywhere. One of those places is in your brain. So please raise your hand now if you have ever made a paper airplane in your life. Excellent. Keep it up. Just look around. It looks like you do just fine. So if you got your hand up, go ahead and start making your plane now. And if you're sitting next to someone who's making that plane and you want to copy it, please go ahead, look at that plane and make it with them. For anyone else who prefers to follow along, I'm also going to be doing it with you, step by step. We're going to together hack the familiar and a model of a paper plane to create something memorable in about 60 seconds. So this is what I'm doing. I'm marking the middle of it. If you're doing your thing, just go ahead and ignore me. I'm going to do one with 7 folds. So we're going to fold it down here and here. Great. Then I'm going to follow the same folds again, keeping this middle line that we created in the beginning. There we go. Excellent. How's it going? Keep going. Then I'm going to fold it like this. And then create the 2 wings by folding these 2 bits out here. So this one out, and this one out. How's it looking? All right, all right. So it looks like we are nearly ready to fly, okay? But before we do, let's add a little personal touch. Dedicate your plane to someone you love. Write their name on one of the wings. There should be a pen around there somewhere. Think of someone you want to dedicate your plane to and write it down. Because it's easy to feel like history is something that's just happening to us and around us. But I think what we can do is create these temporary communities that for a brief time together can enable something to happen that wouldn't have otherwise, however humble or however spectacular. So, hold your planes with the dominant hand in front of you. And you can stand up if you want. And start slowly raising them up. We're near the end. Soon we're going to take off. you can aim your planes just above my head, but only when I shout fly, okay? Take a deep breath, ladies and gentlemen, and those smart enough to reject binary gender norms, thank you so much. You've been wonderful. As we go into the future, let's take the post-normal by storm, but with grace. Fly! Thank you very much. Thank you.